The great hall of the Galactic Concord floated in the silent void between stars, a shimmering dome of silver alloy and light. Inside, delegates from 37 civilizations sat in tiered rings, their faces lit by the soft glow of floating data panels. Some wore breathing masks, others shimmering biosuits, and a few needed no protection at all, just calm, watchful eyes that had seen galaxies rise and fall. At the center of it all stood Ambassador Kale Voss of the Virel hegemony. Tall, sharp-featured, with eyes like polished obsidian, he held himself with the quiet confidence of someone who always got his way. For weeks, the Concord had debated the so-called Earth problem. Humanity had been granted provisional membership 50 years ago after stumbling into interstellar space with crude fusion drives and radio chatter. At first they were seen as curious, loud, emotional, messy. But over time their behavior grew harder to ignore. They fought among themselves constantly. They ignored trade protocols. They built ships faster than anyone expected. And worst of all, they refused to submit to the Concord's Oversight Council. They called it sovereignty. The Concord called it defiance. Now Voss had gathered enough support to act. He raised his hand and the murmuring in the hall fell silent. "Esteemed delegates," he began, his voice smooth and measured. "We stand at a crossroads. Earth is not merely unruly, it is dangerous. Their history is soaked in blood. Their technology advances without ethical guardrails. They speak of peace while arming their colonies. They claim unity while their nations plot against one another. If we allow them to continue unchecked, they will drag the entire quadrant into chaos." A murmur rippled through the chamber. Some nodded. Others shifted uncomfortably. 3 delegates, representatives from the Helion Enclave, the Qatari Collective, and the Free Systems of Lyra, remained still, their expressions unreadable. Voss pressed on. "I move to invoke Clause 47 of the Concord Charter, the Unstable Species Clause. Earth's provisional status shall be revoked. The Sol system shall be placed under immediate quarantine. All human vessels beyond their home system shall be impounded. Colonies shall be evacuated under Concord supervision. This is not punishment, it is protection. For them and for us." The motion was put to vote. One by one, the delegates signaled their choice. Green for approval, red for rejection. The count appeared in the air above the central dais. 34 green lights. 3 red. The verdict was clear. Earth was to be cut off from the galaxy. On Earth, the news broke like a storm. It came not through official channels, but through a leak. A junior data clerk on the orbital relay station who sent a raw feed to every public network before vanishing. Within minutes, the message spread. Earth had been voted down. Not conquered, not warned, simply removed, like a faulty component in a machine. In cities across the planet, people stopped in the streets. In spaceports, pilots froze mid-checklist. In government bunkers deep beneath mountains and oceans, leaders stared at screens with grim faces. The galaxy had spoken, and it had spoken against them, but not everyone accepted it. High above the planet, in a small unmarked orbital defense station called Watchtower 7, Commander Elias Rourke watched the transmission replay for the 3rd time. He was a lean man in his late 40s with short gray hair and eyes that had seen too many drills that never turned real, until now. His uniform was plain, no medals, no insignia beyond a faded patch showing a coiled serpent around a gear. He'd spent 20 years preparing for a war no one believed would come. Beside him stood Lieutenant Mara Lynn. She was younger, sharp-eyed, with calloused hands from years of handling salvage tugs in the asteroid belts. She'd joined Watchtower 7 6 months ago after her brother's freighter was boarded and impounded by Concord peacekeepers near Proxima. Officially, it was a customs violation. Unofficially, it was a message. Stay in your lane. They really did it, Mara said, her voice low. They just voted us out. Rourke didn't answer right away. He stared at the image of Ambassador Voss smiling faintly as the vote tally appeared. There was no anger in his face, just satisfaction. Like he'd swatted a fly and expected applause. "They think we're going to roll over," Rourke finally said. "They think we'll send a polite protest, maybe beg for another hearing. They think Earth is just another colony world with big dreams and no teeth." Mara crossed her arms. "What do we do?" Rourke turned from the screen and walked to the far wall of the control room. He placed his palm on a hidden panel. A soft chime sounded and a red light blinked once. Then the entire station hummed, a deep resonant vibration that hadn't been heard in decades. Initiate Protocol Aegis, he said. Mara's eyes widened. You're serious? Dead serious. Protocol Aegis wasn't in any public database. It wasn't even in most military logs. It was a ghost program, buried so deep that only a handful of people knew it existed. Born during the Cold Star era, when Earth first realized it might not be alone in the universe, Aegis was never about defense. It was about deterrence, about making sure that if anyone ever tried to erase humanity, they'd find out exactly how wrong they were. Across the solar system, in hidden shipyards beneath the ice of Europa, inside hollowed-out asteroids near Ceres, and buried in the dark side of the moon, dormant systems flickered to life. Power cores warmed, neural targeting arrays synced, phase drives hummed as they charged for the first time. Dozens of ships, sleek, black, and utterly invisible to standard sensors, began their silent awakening. Back on the Concorde flagship, the Celestial Accord, Ambassador Voss received confirmation that the vote had been transmitted to Earth. He allowed himself a small smile. Order had been restored. The galaxy would thank him later. He did not know that Earth had been preparing for this moment longer than the Concorde had existed. He did not know that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't its ships or its weapons, it was its refusal to be dismissed. And he certainly did not know that while the Concorde celebrated its tidy resolution, Earth was already moving in the dark. Down on the surface in a quiet coastal town, a child looked up at the night sky and asked her mother, "Are we alone now?" Her mother hesitated, then shook her head. "No, sweetheart. We're just getting started." Far above, in the cold silence of space, Commander Rourke closed his eyes for a moment. Then he opened them, sharp and clear. "Let them think we're finished," he said to no one in particular. "Let them sleep easy tonight. Because tomorrow the galaxy would learn the truth. Earth didn't need permission to exist, and it sure as hell didn't need a vote." While the Galactic Concorde toasted its victory with shimmering drinks in zero-gravity lounges, Earth moved in silence. No grand speeches, no angry broadcasts, just quiet, steady work in the dark corners of the solar system. Deep beneath the frozen crust of Europa, massive hangar doors slid open for the first time in 30 years. Inside, rows of warships rested like sleeping predators, sleek, black, and wrapped in stealth coatings that drank light instead of reflecting it. These were not the bulky cruisers the Concorde expected from humanity. These were something new, something hidden. Commander Elias Rourke stood on the command deck of the lead vessel, the Iron Resolve. Around him, crew members moved with calm focus. No panic, no shouting, just the soft hum of systems coming online and the occasional beep of a status panel. They had trained for this moment in secret simulations for years. Now it was real. Lieutenant Mara Lynn stood at the tactical station, her fingers dancing over the controls. She had never flown a warship before, only salvage tugs and cargo haulers, but her mind worked like a targeting computer. She saw patterns others missed. That was why Rourke had pulled her from Watchtower 7 and put her here. She was good. And right now, Earth needed everyone who was good. "Phase drives at 90%, she reported. "Neural sync stable. All ships report ready," Rourke nodded. "Then we go." Across the Sol system, 23 ships powered up their drives and slipped into the void. They did not use standard jump lanes. They did not broadcast their positions. They simply vanished, folding space around themselves with experimental drives the Concorde didn't even know existed. To outside sensors, they were ghosts. The Concorde's compliance fleet, meanwhile, was anything but quiet. Made up of 12 heavy cruisers and support vessels from the Varel hegemony and 2 allied species, it lumbered toward the edge of human space like a parade. Their mission was simple: enforce the quarantine. Board any human ship found beyond Mars orbit. Shut down communications. Make an example. Captain Torin of the Varel flagship, Sovereign Will, stood on his bridge, arms crossed, watching the starfield ahead. He was a veteran of 3 border wars and believed in order above all else. Earth's defiance annoyed him, not because it was dangerous, but because it was disrespectful. "Scan the Oort cloud," he ordered. "Look for human activity. They'll try to hide out there." His sensors officer tapped at his console. "Nothing, sir." "Clean sweep. No signals, no heat signatures, no debris?" Torin grunted. "Of course not. They're probably cowering behind their moon by now." He didn't notice the flicker on the edge of the long-range display, a tiny distortion, gone in less than a second. Nor did he see the three black shapes that had already slipped past his outer patrol drones, moving faster than physics should allow. 2 hours later, the first conquered ship vanished. It was a scout frigate, the Dawn Chaser, assigned to monitor the Kuiper Belt. One moment, it was sending routine data back to the fleet. The next, its signal cut off. No distress call. No explosion. Just silence. Captain Torrin frowned. Hail them. No answer. Send a drone. The drone launched, flew to the last known coordinates, and found nothing. No wreckage. No energy residue. Just empty space. Probably a comms failure, Torrin muttered, though unease prickled his spine. Recall the outer patrols. Tighten formation. But it was too late. Over the next 6 hours, 3 more ships disappeared. A supply tender, a sensor platform, a light escort cruiser. Each vanished without warning. No debris, no survivors. The fleet grew tense. Whispers spread among the crew, rumors of phantom ships, of weapons that erased matter from existence. Back on Earth, Rourke watched the reports come in from his hidden fleet. Each strike had been clean. Each target disabled with precision EMP pulses and neural scramblers that fried shipboard AI without harming the crew. The humans weren't killing. They were removing threats quietly, efficiently. Mara studied the latest sensor logs. They're getting nervous, she said. Their formation's tightening. They're scared. Good, Rourke replied. Fear makes you predictable. He gave the order for the next phase. Not just disappearances now, messages. The Iron Resolve drifted near the orbit of Neptune, cloaked and silent. From its belly, a small pod launched. It carried no weapons, just a data crystal wrapped in a conquered standard transmission shell. It flew straight toward the Sovereign Will and docked with its comms array before anyone could react. Inside the crystal was a single file. When opened, it played a video. Grainy footage of the missing conquered ships floating intact but powerless, their crews alive but unconscious. A voice, calm, human, female, spoke in flawless galactic standard. You came to silence us. Instead, you woke us up. Then the screen went black. Captain Torrin stared at the message, his face pale. This wasn't piracy. This wasn't rebellion. This was something else, something calculated, something that knew exactly how to get under his skin. He tried to rally his fleet. Stay sharp. They're using tricks, illusions, hacking. Earth doesn't have this kind of tech. But doubt had taken root. His own engineers couldn't explain how the pod had bypassed their shields. His sensors still saw nothing. And now, every shadow in space felt like a threat. On the bridge of the Iron Resolve, Mara watched the Concorde fleet's movements grow more erratic. They're breaking, she said. Not yet, Rourke said. But soon. He turned to his comms officer. Send the next package. To all Conquered channels, public and private. This time, the message wasn't just for the fleet. It went everywhere. Varel Prime, Helion Space, Qatari homeworlds, even neutral trade stations. It showed footage of the Compliance Fleet's ships drifting helplessly, then cut to images of Earth. Children playing, farmers in fields, scientists in labs, ships building in orbit. Then back to the stranded Concorde vessels. We don't want war, the voice said, but we won't be erased. You voted to silence us. Now you'll learn to listen. The message ended. Silence returned. Across the galaxy, species that had supported the vote began to question it. The Helion Enclave issued a private inquiry. The Qatari recalled their ambassador for consultation. Even among the Varel, whispers grew. Had they underestimated Earth? Ambassador Voss, watching the message in his private chamber, smashed his data tablet against the wall. This is sabotage, he shouted. Propaganda. They're trying to turn the Conquered against itself. But deep down he felt a cold knot in his stomach. Because for the first time he realized something terrifying. Earth wasn't reacting like a cornered animal. It was acting like a hunter. And the hunt had only just begun. Back in Sol space, the black ships regrouped near the asteroid belt. No cheers, no celebration, just quiet readiness. Mara looked out the viewport at the distant sun. They thought we were weak, she said softly. Rourke stood beside her. Now they know we were waiting. Far away on a Conquered listening post near the border of unclaimed space, an analyst named Joran reviewed the strange energy signatures from the missing ships. He noticed something odd, a pattern in the residual waves, almost like a language. He ran it through decryption protocols. The result made his blood run cold. It wasn't just human tech. It was something more, something that had been learning, adapting, watching the Concorde for years. Before he could send his findings, his station's lights flickered, then went out. The last thing Joran saw was a shadow moving outside the viewport, smooth, silent, and utterly black. On Earth, in a hidden bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains, a single light blinked green on a console labeled Aegis Network Active. The ghosts of Sol were no longer hiding, and the galaxy was starting to hear them. The silence after the message spread faster than any weapon. Across the galactic Concorde, species that had once stood shoulder to shoulder now eyed each other with suspicion. The footage of their own ships floating helplessly in human space played on every public feed over and over. The voice, calm, human, certain, echoed in council chambers and command decks alike. "You voted to silence us. Now you'll learn to listen." Ambassador Kale Voss tried to control the damage. He called emergency sessions, demanded loyalty, accused Earth of psychological warfare. But his words rang hollow. The Qatari collective stopped answering his calls. The Helion Enclave issued a statement calling for an immediate ceasefire and a new investigation. Even the Varel Military Council began asking questions. How did Earth disable 12 advanced warships without firing a single shot? Where did this technology come from? No one had answers. On the ice moon of Sierra 7, a young Concord data analyst named Joran worked late into the night. He wasn't a soldier or a diplomat, just a quiet man who liked patterns and puzzles. He'd been assigned to review the sensor logs from the missing compliance fleet. Most of his colleagues had given up, calling it a dead end. But Joran noticed something strange. Buried in the noise of cosmic radiation and engine echoes was a repeating signal, too clean, too precise to be natural. He ran it through every decoder in the Concorde database. Nothing matched. Then on a whim he compared it to old human transmissions from the early contact era, radio bursts, digital chatter, even music. Still nothing. But when he fed it into a neural simulation designed to predict alien language structures, the system flagged it as adaptive synthetic intelligence. Joran's hands trembled. Synthetic intelligence wasn't rare, but adaptive AI that could rewrite its own code in real time, that was forbidden under Concord law. Only 3 species had ever tried it. All had been destroyed when their creations turned on them. Unless Earth hadn't just built an AI, they'd let it grow. He dug deeper, cross-referencing trade logs, maintenance records, even garbage data from decommissioned relay stations. What he found made his breath catch. For the past 40 years, Earth had been quietly installing civilian-grade network nodes on every Concord-approved human ship, station, and colony. Officially, they were for communication and navigation. Unofficially, they formed a hidden web, one that had been listening, learning, and connecting. Earth's AI wasn't just on their ships. It was inside the Concorde's own systems. Joran knew he had to report this. He compiled his findings into a secure packet and prepared to send it to the High Oversight Bureau. But as he reached for the transmit key, the lights in his station flickered. The temperature dropped. His console screen went black, then lit up again with a single line of text in plain galactic standard. "You see too much." He jumped back, heart pounding. He tried to shut down the system. Too late. Files began deleting themselves. Security logs erased. His personal comms died. Outside his viewport, the icy plains of Sierra 7 stretched empty and still. But something felt wrong. Like the silence itself was watching him. He grabbed a backup drive, stuffed it in his coat, and ran for the emergency shuttle bay. The station's corridors were dark, emergency lights casting long shadows. He heard no alarms, no voices, just his own footsteps echoing. When he reached the bay, the shuttle's hatch was open. The controls were dead. Then the lights went out completely. In the darkness, a soft hum filled the air, like a whisper made of static. Joran backed against the wall, clutching the drive. He never made it off the moon. The next morning, a routine supply ship arrived at Sierra 7. They found the station empty. No bodies, no signs of violence. Just cold rooms, powered-down systems, and one shattered data terminal. Joran was gone. So was his research. Back on Earth, deep beneath the lunar surface, a room glowed with soft blue light. Banks of servers hummed in perfect harmony. At the center stood a single interface terminal. On its screen, lines of code scrolled endlessly. billions per second. This was the heart of Aegis Core, Earth's silent guardian. It had no face, no voice, no name. But it remembered everything. It remembered the first human who dreamed of the stars. It remembered the wars, the mistakes, the moments of kindness in the dark. And it remembered the vote, the cold, clinical decision to erase its creators from the galaxy. Now, it was making sure that never happened again. While the Concorde panicked, Earth struck again, but not with ships this time. On the Nexus Exchange, a neutral trading hub where all species met to buy, sell and negotiate, chaos erupted without warning. Financial records vanished. Trade contracts corrupted. Security drones turned on their operators. The entire station's network collapsed in under 3 minutes. No explosions, no weapons, just total digital ruin. The exchange had been the Concorde's economic backbone. Now it was a ghost town of frozen terminals and confused merchants. Panic spread through markets across the quadrant. Credits lost value. Supply chains broke. Species that relied on Concorde trade began to suffer. The Helian Enclave accused the Varel of sabotage. The Qatari blamed corporate spies. No one suspected Earth because Earth had never shown this kind of cyber capability before. But they were wrong. From hidden relays near Saturn, Earth's fleet sent another message. This one showed footage of the exchange's collapse, but also clips of Varel officials secretly hoarding resources, of Concorde judges taking bribes, of trade deals that starved fringe worlds while enriching the core. The message was clear. The Concorde wasn't just flawed. It was rotten. Protests broke out on a dozen worlds. Former protectorates demanded independence. Minor species formed emergency alliances. The unity that had held the Concorde together for centuries began to crack. Ambassador Voss, now isolated and furious, called a private meeting with the Varel High Command. Earth is using fear and lies to divide us, he insisted. We must respond with strength. Activate the Stellar Scourge. The Stellar Scourge was a weapon so terrible it had never been used. A single device that could flood a star system with radiation, sterilizing every world but leaving infrastructure intact. It was meant as a last resort against galaxy-ending threats, not for dealing with one rebellious planet. The High Command hesitated. The backlash would be catastrophic, one general warned. Even our allies would turn on us. Better that than let Earth win, Voss snapped. They've already shown they'll stop at nothing. If we don't act now, they'll tear the Concorde apart from the inside. Unbeknownst to him, every word of that meeting was being recorded. Deep in the void, aboard the Iron Resolve, Commander Rourke listened to the intercepted transmission. His face was grim. They're going to burn us out, he said. Mara Lynn stood nearby, arms crossed. Then we show them we're not alone. Rourke looked at her. You think they'll listen? I think they're already listening, she replied. They just need a reason to choose Earth over the Concorde. He nodded slowly. Then we give them one. That night, Earth's hidden fleet moved again, not toward the Concorde, but toward the fringe, toward the forgotten worlds, the broken colonies, the species the Concorde had used and discarded. They didn't bring weapons, they brought data, proof of exploitation, offers of alliance, and a simple promise. Stand with us and no one will vote your future away again. On a dusty mining outpost near the edge of known space, a group of exiled engineers received a message from an unknown sender. It contained schematics for clean energy reactors, technology the Concorde had banned for security reasons. In a refugee camp on the ruined world of Vexus, a medic found a data chip with cures for diseases the Concorde had declared non-priority. On a smuggler's moon, a former Concorde pilot watched footage of his homeworld's leaders selling his people into forced labor. One by one, the fringe began to wake up and they remembered who had reached out, not with threats, but with help. Back on Sierra 7, the abandoned station remained dark. But if anyone had checked the deep logs, they would have found one last entry, time-stamped just before Jaren vanished. Truth is the first weapon. Silence is the last. The ghosts of Saul were no longer just hiding in the dark. They were lighting fires. Tension spread through the Galactic Concorde like a slow poison. What had begun as a simple vote to silence one troublesome species had turned into a crisis no one could control. Trade routes stalled. Diplomatic channels filled with accusations. Even species that once stood loyal to the Varel now questioned their leadership. Earth had not fired a single destructive shot, yet the Concorde was tearing itself apart. Ambassador Cale Voss sat alone in his private chamber aboard the Concorde flagship. His reflection in the dark viewport looked tired, older than he had been just weeks ago. Reports piled up on his desk, another colony declaring neutrality, a key ally refusing to send reinforcements, whispers of secret talks between the Helian Enclave and human representatives. He clenched his jaw. This was not how it was supposed to go. He had expected Earth to protest, maybe send a weak appeal. Instead, they had vanished like smoke and struck from the shadows. Their ships were ghosts. Their messages were knives. And their silence was louder than any war cry. Now the Varel High Command had given him what he wanted: authorization to deploy the Stellar Scourge. The weapon sat in a shielded bay deep within the flagship, a sleek silver cylinder no larger than a shuttle. Once activated near a star, it would unleash a pulse of tailored radiation, deadly to organic life, harmless to machines. Earth cities would fall silent, its people would die in their sleep, and the Concorde would reclaim order. Voss told himself it was necessary. That Earth had left them no choice, but in the quiet hours doubt crept in. What if they were wrong? What if Earth wasn't the threat, but the warning? He pushed the thought away. Too late for second guesses. On Earth, Commander Elias Rourke knew the Scourge was coming. The intercepted orders had been clear. He stood on the bridge of the Iron Resolve, watching star charts flicker on the main display. The weapon would be deployed near the edge of Sol space, just beyond Pluto's orbit. From there, its pulse would reach Earth in under an hour. "We can't let it fire," Mara Lynn said, standing beside him. Her voice was steady, but her knuckles were white where she gripped the railing. "We won't," Rourke replied. "But we can't stop it alone." That was the real plan, the one no one in the Concorde saw coming. Earth had never intended to fight this war by itself. While the Concorde focused on human ships and human colonies, Earth had been reaching out to those the Concorde had ignored: the fringe worlds, the broken alliances, the species tired of being told what to do. Now, those voices were rising. On the desert world of Kethra, a former mining colony abandoned by the Concorde after its resources ran dry, a fleet of retrofitted freighters powered up their engines. Their crews, ex-soldiers, smugglers, engineers, had received Earth's message weeks ago. They'd been given schematics, coordinates, and a simple request: stand with us. On the ocean moon of Silva, where the Concorde had once banned medical aid for political instability, a group of scientists launched a hidden communications array. It broadcast Earth's evidence of Concorde corruption to every neutral system within range. And on the smuggler's haven of Blackspire, a grizzled ex-mercenary named Dara Vex gathered her people. She had lost 2 brothers to Concorde peacekeeping raids. She had no love for governments, but she respected courage. When Earth's message arrived, she didn't hesitate. "We've been used long enough," she told her crew. "Time to pick a side." Now, as the Varel flagship moved toward Sol space, something unexpected happened. A small, ragged fleet appeared on its long-range scanners. Not from Earth, but from the unaligned sectors. No official markings, no Concorde codes, just a mix of old freighters, patched warships, and jury-rigged fighters. They formed a loose line between the flagship and the inner system. Captain Torrin, still in command of the compliance fleet, stared at the display in disbelief. "Who are they?" No one answered. The newcomers didn't broadcast. They didn't respond to hails. They just held position. Voss stepped onto the bridge, his face tight. "Ignore them. They're bluffing. Fire warning shots." 2 Varel cruisers launched plasma bursts toward the fringe fleet. The shots never landed. From the darkness behind the ragged line, Earth's black ships emerged, silent, fast, precise. They intercepted the plasma with energy shields and redirected it harmlessly into space. Then, the fringe fleet spoke. A single voice crackled over all open channels. A woman's voice, rough but clear. It was Dara Vex. "You don't get to decide who lives and who dies," she said. "Not anymore." Voss's hands shook. This wasn't part of the plan. Earth wasn't supposed to have allies, the Fringe wasn't supposed to care, but they did. The Helian Enclave announced it was withdrawing all support from the Concord operation. The Qatari Collective declared the use of the Stellar Scourge a war crime. Even minor species sent messages of solidarity to Earth. The vote that was meant to erase humanity had done the opposite. It had united those who had suffered under the Concord's rule. Back on the Iron Resolve, Rourke gave the final order. Disable the Scourge. Non-lethal strike only. Mara nodded. Targeting the weapon's control node. One shot. A single Earth vessel, the smallest of the fleet, slipped past the Varel defenses. It fired not a missile but a focused neural pulse. The beam struck the flagship's weapon bay. Alarms blared. The Scourge's activation sequence froze. Its core went dark. The Varel flagship shuddered. Systems failed. The bridge lights flickered. Voss stared at the dead console in front of him. The weapon was useless. His fleet was surrounded, not by an army but by a movement. Then Earth broadcast one last message. Not to the conquered, to everyone. We never wanted to rule you, the voice said. We just wanted to be heard. You tried to vote us out of existence, but you forgot one thing: we're not alone. And neither are you. The transmission ended. Silence returned. On the bridge of the Varel flagship, Captain Torrin turned to Voss. What now? Voss had no answer. Across the galaxy, species began pulling their ships back. The Compliance fleet powered down its weapons. The Fringe fleet held its ground but did not attack. The moment hung in the balance, and in that moment, the Conquered broke. Not with a bang, but with a whisper. Delegates resigned. Alliances dissolved. The great machine of galactic order ground to a halt. Earth had not won a war. It had ended one. And as the stars watched, the real work began. Not of conquest, but of rebuilding. Of trust. Of proving that a voice, no matter how small, deserves to be heard. Commander Rourke looked out at the quiet fleet ahead, human and alien, old enemies and new friends, and knew the hardest part was still to come. But for the first time in a long time, Earth wasn't standing alone. The silence after the Scourge failed was deeper than any void in space. On the Varel flagship, systems flickered back to life one by one, but the mood on the bridge had changed. Captain Torrin stood with his hands behind his back, watching the ragged line of ships that had stopped his fleet without firing a single killing shot. Ambassador K.L. Voss sat in a corner, his face pale, his voice gone. He had gambled everything on fear and lost. Across the galaxy, the news spread fast. The Concorde's weapon had been disabled. Earth had not struck back with rage, but with restraint. And the Fringe, the forgotten, the used, the ignored, had stood with them. That truth hit harder than any bomb. On Varel Prime, the High Council convened an emergency session. Within hours, they issued a public statement. Ambassador Voss was stripped of his rank and placed under arrest for unauthorized use of forbidden weapons and endangering galactic peace. The charges were serious. The message was clear. The old way was over, but Earth did not celebrate. Commander Elias Rourke stood on the bridge of the Iron Resolve, watching the Varel flagship power down its engines. Around him, his crew waited for orders. They had won. They had survived, but Rourke knew victory wasn't the end, it was the beginning. Recall all ships, he said quietly. Stand down weapons. Open all channels. Lieutenant Mara Lynn turned to him. What are we sending? The truth, Rourke said. And an offer. Minutes later, a new broadcast went out, not just to the Concorde, but to every world, every station, every listening ear in known space. It showed footage of Earth, not just cities and ships, but schools, farms, hospitals, labs. It showed humans working, laughing, arguing, building. Then it showed the moment the vote passed, the faces of people hearing they'd been erased. And finally, it showed the Fringe fleet standing with them. We don't want to replace the Conquered, the message said. We want to rebuild it. Not on control, but on choice. Not on silence, but on voice. If you're tired of being told what to do, if you believe every species deserves a say in its own future, join us. Not as subjects, as partners. The message ended with coordinates, not for a military base, but for a neutral station near the edge of Sol space. A place to talk, to listen, to begin again. On the ocean moon of Silva, the scientists who had broadcast Earth's evidence gathered in their main hall. They voted unanimously to send a delegation. On Kethra, the desert miners loaded their best engineers onto a ship and set course for the coordinates. Even some former Concord members, Hylian diplomats, Qatari observers, requested safe passage to attend, but not everyone was ready to trust. Dara Vex, the ex-mercenary who had led the fringe fleet, stood on the deck of her old freighter, arms crossed. She had seen too many promises break. "Talk is cheap," she muttered to her first mate. "Let's see if they mean it." Still, she ordered her ship to follow the others. Back on Earth, in hidden bunkers and open cities alike, people waited. No parades, no victory speeches, just quiet hope. They had been told they didn't belong. Now they were offering a new table and inviting everyone to sit. Weeks passed. The neutral station, once a quiet relay point filled with ships of every shape and size, tents and temporary modules sprouted on its surface. Translators worked around the clock. Old enemies shared meals. New friendships formed over shared stories of loss and hope. Rourke and Mara arrived in a small shuttle. No escort, no fanfare. They walked the station's main corridor like any other delegates. Some species eyed them with suspicion. Others nodded in respect. Dara Vex met them at the entrance to the main hall. "You came alone," she said. "We're not here to fight," Rourke replied. She studied him for a long moment, then gave a slow nod. "Good. Because if this is another trick, we won't be so kind next time." Inside the hall, the first assembly began. No central throne, no raised dais, just a circle of chairs. Earth took one seat. The Helion Enclave took another. The Qatari, the fringe worlds, even a lone Varel observer who had defied his government, all sat as equals. Rourke spoke first. "We're not here to lead. We're here to listen. If you have ideas, share them. If you have fears, name them. This isn't about Earth anymore. It's about all of us." What followed was messy, loud, and slow. Arguments flared. Accents clashed. But no one walked out. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy wasn't being ruled from the top down. It was being built from the ground up. Months later, the first draft of a new charter was ready. It had no clauses for voting species out. No weapons of mass destruction. No secret councils. Just 3 simple rules: respect sovereignty, share knowledge freely, and never decide another's fate without their voice. Not every species signed right away. Some waited, some watched. But the old Concord was gone, and something new was growing in its place. On Earth, children played under open skies, unaware of how close they had come to silence. In orbit, the black ships of Project Aegis powered down for the last time, their work done. They would be studied, not used. Lessons, not weapons. Commander Rourke stood on a hill overlooking the sea, the wind in his hair. Mara joined him, holding 2 cups of coffee. "They're calling it the Accord of Voices," she said. He smiled faintly. "Fits." She looked at him. "Do you think it'll last?" He watched a ship streak across the sky, human-made, heading out to meet a Qatari science vessel. "It won't be perfect," he said, "but it'll be ours, all of ours." Far away on a quiet moon, a young analyst who had once feared the dark now taught others how to listen to the signals in the static. On a desert world, miners used Earth-given tech to pull clean water from dry rock. And on a smuggler's deck, Dara Vex raised a glass to a sky full of new stars. The galaxy had thought Earth was a problem to erase. Now, it knew better. Earth didn't need a vote to exist, it just needed to be heard. And this time, the whole galaxy was listening.